So, Malcolm, I'm going to start this podcast the way I start every podcast of Jemele Hill is Unbothered, and that is by asking you, Malcolm-Jamal Warner, when did you become unbothered?
Uh, Maybe about 72 hours ago.
Okay, you win the award for most recent answer.
Yeah, I still struggle. Um, yeah, I still struggle with not with not being bothered by, shouldn't be bothered with. Um, I think I'm just getting at the point for me where I am I'm the most comfortable in my skin now. Like I spent so much of my life so concerned about what other people uh think of me or thought of me. And being an artist, it's a really interesting, balancing act, because as an artist, you want to not care what people think about you, but the success of your art greatly depends upon what people think about you, right? So it's a really interesting place to be in. But yeah, and I'd say recently, in all seriousness, probably really the last couple of years, where I've been able to let go of that great concern of what people think about me, if that makes sense.
It does. Was there any reason that you pinpointed 72 hours ago?
Um, no, I was being funny. Um,
You were being facetious. Okay, I
I
was
was
like, did
being
something happen?
no, I was being funny. And then, but part of it is also, I have a 5-year old daughter, right? And and incredible wife. Uh, so like outside of that, that's the most crucial thing in my life, right? So like outside of that, it's like, you know what, I can't, I don't have the bandwidth to be bothered by a whole lot of shit, except my 5-year old daughter, who sometimes gets under my skin.
So, you mentioned your 5-year-old daughter. Now you had a child, like, I guess what some would consider later in life.
Sure.
It's all
Yeah.
relative.
Yeah.
But how do you think you having a child, quote unquote, later in life, how does that impact the way that you parent?
Oh my gosh. I There's no way that I would have been able to be as an effective husband and father had I done this any earlier in life. And I've been in long-term relationships more years of my adult life than I hadn't. Um, but there was something about being married and starting a family that just, I always knew I wasn't ready. And I thank God, literally still, like every other day, for the wisdom and fortitude to have not done this any earlier. Because as an older parent, there's a level of you know maturation that I have now, patience, and just a better understanding of myself, and a better understanding of how I want to parent. Which I think if I was a parent 20 years ago, I'd be parenting a lot different.
Your parents were very integral in your life,
Yeah.
and you speak of them, often about the influence that they have. What from them would you say were some of the most important lessons about parenting that you have tried to implement with your own daughter?
That no matter what happens, uh, that they love me. Like that was even when I was, even if I was getting into trouble for something that I did, it was still paramount that they love me. They may be disappointed in me, they may be angry with me, frustrated with me. Um, they're giving me these consequences that I have to face because of what I did. But there was never ever a doubt in my mind, even when they got divorced. Um, there was never a doubt in my mind that they loved me, and that's one of the things that we make sure that our daughter knows Especially me, because I get frustrated and I get triggered uh, by a freaking 5 year old at times. But even in those moments, I still make sure that she knows that I love her.
Mm. How does a 5-year-old trigger you?
Man, it's so interesting. It's crazy. So my wife and I, um, we just celebrated our seventh anniversary a couple months ago. Um, we get on so well. Like in 7.5 years, we've never had a fight, an argument, a raised voice, a harsh word said to one another. And it's not like we agree on everything, right? There's just a way that we have a way of communicating like adults. Um, so I thought I was all good in terms of whatever lessons I needed to learn, right? Because I don't have any issues with my wife, but my daughter, there's still some lessons that I still have to learn. But when I'm honest with myself, the biggest frustrations probably come from her not doing things the way uh, I think they should be done. And I have to be really honest that probably 75% of the time, when I just step back and let her do her thing, 75% of the time I kind of go, oh, I didn't look at it that way. Right?
Mm,
It's really interesting. So when you hear parents talk about, my child teaches me, you go, oh yeah, oh that's so cute. But it's like it's real. She'll do something. I'm like, well, you know what? I did not see it that way. And then it makes me more. It just reminds me, just in life, how there are so many different perspectives. People can be looking at the same thing and have very different perspectives. And it doesn't necessarily make one perspective any less real than the other. You just have to allow for, okay, people see things, people can see the same thing and see them differently. Like, you know the 7 habits of highly effective people,
oh, highly
or Stephen
successful
Covey.
people. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and remember, and in the book, there's an illustration. And you look at the picture, and the picture looks like this old woman, and then you see another perspective, and like it's like, oh, I see how somebody can see that as a young woman, right? So this is a perfect reminder of. Um, I think the biggest thing is not taking things personal, because people see things through their own filter, and that filter is based on their life experiences. So going back to my daughter, my experience with her is a constant reminder of how I walk through life, and allowing for other perspectives, whether I agree with them or not. Um, allow that they are, um, someone else's perspective is as real for them as mine is for me. If that makes sense.
Mm. No, that definitely makes sense. I, I'm going to share something with you that a therapist told me and my mother, and it really, I think it opened her eyes and also opened mine. This therapist told us that parents have a tendency. I don't have children, but that parents have a tendency to think that your children came here personality wise as a blank canvas, and that's not true.
No,
They actually
right.
came here with a personality
Yeah,
that is distinctly different from yours, because I think a
right.
lot of parents think that you mold their personality, and that's
Yeah.
not true. So sometimes when you run into these impasses, or you kind of knuck against each other, it's like, I didn't teach you that. It's like, well, they have their own personality, and you might
Yeah.
have to accept what that is, that it's not like yours.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the really interesting thing about having a young child. So I remember, like even at like 1, 2 years old, we were already in the mindset of respecting her, um, as a human being, not just looking at her
Mm,
as a 2 year old, but no, but respecting her as a human being. So I think that's actually one of the challenging, um, that's one of the challenging things about being a parent, because um, you want to be able to mold that personality as opposed to seeing the personality and helping to guide it. So it's a really interesting. Again, I'm glad I waited as long as I did to be a parent.
Now, I guess speaking of young, distinct personalities, you certainly have one because you've been acting since you basically came out the womb, you know, and but for a lot of people who don't know or not aware, I mean, you're quite not just a musician, but you're a poet, and I've read about how your father was a major influence, or how he wanted you to be a musician. So why didn't you start with music right away? Why did acting happen as opposed to music, especially considering the way that your father felt about music?
Right. What's interesting, I took piano when I was a kid, but I didn't have a piano at home. So at some point, I stopped taking piano because I couldn't practice. Um, and then I got into basketball, and then the acting thing came about really because my mother was always trying to find things for me to do outside of just coming home from school and hanging out with my friends. Because my parents were separated, and I was part of the latchkey generation. Right? I was a latchkey kid, so my mother was always trying to find things for me to do. So it was basketball, and then there was one season, 1 year basketball season was over, and a friend of hers suggested uh, taking this acting class. There was this community theater group in Inglewood, California, and I went down and auditioned and got in and started doing theater and just really loved it. Um, I think maybe had I had a piano at home and really went down that lane, maybe I would have loved it as much. I don't know, but the acting was something that I just absolutely loved. At 9 years old, like this was like I love this. This is um, it was something that's I don't it just excited me being able to use my imagination. Um, being a young Leo kid, uh, that first curtain call at the end of the play when I come out and everybody stands up, I was like, oh, I can really get into this.
Well, I'm married to a Leo, and you Leos do love to be celebrated.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But as long as you know that,
I
right?
know how y'all get
Yeah,
I know how y'all get down. Y'all are definitely here for the performance. So I got it. So how then do you go from doing community theater to really taking acting, sort of seriously as something that this is what you wanted to pursue? I mean, I know that wasn't an individual decision. You got parents
yeah.
who obviously are involved in this. So how did you make the leap from just extracurricular activity to I'm about to do this as a career?
Well, I was doing the community theater, and agents will come down and scout talent or whatever. So there was an agent who saw me in this first play, and she went to my mom, was like, "Listen, I want to sign your son." And my mom had gone back to school, and she was in her last year, and she was like, "Look, I'm in school. I can't take him around to auditions, so thank you, but no thank you." And then the following year, I was doing another play. Same agent came down and approached my mom again. She was like, "Okay, you're out of school. You have no excuses. I still want to sign your son." So we're like, "Okay, fine." And I just started doing. I started doing guest spots, guest TV shows. I was still doing theater. So it wasn't really until Cosby came about that I booked that, and then that show became what it was, and then it became a career. Because even when I auditioned for the show, NBC had only ordered 6 episodes, so it was really a matter of, okay, well, we're going to go to New York. We may go to New York for 6 weeks to shoot this show, and my mom thought it was important that at least I can have on my resume that I did 6 episodes of this show with Bill Cosby. So even at that point, it wasn't something that we saw as going to be life changing. But then when it became life changing, it became career changing as well.
Mm. So at what point, as a young child actor, At what point did you start feeling like you're famous?
Oh, early on, because when we were doing the show, we were taking public transportation to work. Like I lived in Fort Greene. First I lived in Flatbush, and I was taking the train to the studio on Avenue M and East 14th Street. Um, and then it wasn't until the show started to air and we started getting recognized a lot that production had to break down and start providing transportation for us to come to work. But there was always so even before Cosby, one Kim Fields was, has always been like my big sister. And I remember, being out with her and people stopping her, and she would sign autographs or take a picture, and she was always really nice. And I remember saying, when I get famous, I'm gonna be like that. Like I knew I'm gonna be famous. So when I get famous, I'm gonna be like that. I'm gonna be nice to people, and that's really cool. So when it was my time up, it was my time up.
Malcolm, a lot of times in Hollywood, we see that when you have child actors, the dynamic with their parents shifts because the child actor is becoming famous, they're making all the money. The parents, for lack of a better way to put it, become employees, but that was definitely not your reality. It seemed like your parents were very intentional about staying and remaining your parents. You know, what do you think it was that allowed them to do that? And why did they have that mindset to make sure that that dynamic never
Sure.
changed?
Well, my mother, as my manager, was very clear that she was an employee. Like we had a contract, so she was very clear on that. Uh, but that had no had no influence on the fact that she was still the mama. Right? And so she became a manager by default because again, like I wasn't groomed for this business, right? It was just something, it was a hobby, it was something to keep me out of trouble. So once Cosby hit, it became a career, and then we had to, take things seriously. So, so the business approach was always the business, but because we were always focused on life after Cosby. Right, like my mother would, when the show first hit, my mother had sat me down and said, "Listen, baby, it's great that this show is the phenomenon that it is, but this show could be over next year. What are you gonna do when the show's over? I can type, I can always get a job, but what are you gonna do when the show's over?" So, uh, so two things to your question. I think for a lot of kids who just kind of go wayward, and go off the wrong path, it's usually because the parents are not parenting, right? So if the kid is, and a lot of times the parents are living vicariously through the kid. So if the parent has gone Hollywood, then there's no one there to give the kid direction. So my mother, who again, we lived every year of the show as if it was the last year because we just didn't know. So because she was always, um, you know, impressed upon me the importance of what was happening down the line and not just with this show, there wasn't really there wasn't really space to just be like, hey, I'm chilling because I'm on TV and this is forever. It was always like, okay, when this show is over, what do I do to stay involved in this industry? Because I knew the transition from being seen as child, you know, star to being taken seriously as an adult would not necessarily be a smooth transition. So I was directing. I was constantly looking at how do I keep this machine moving. So there wasn't really time to to be on some star shit.
Will Smith, in his biography, he said something really fascinating about the difference between being music famous and being TV famous. And one thing he said about being TV famous is that the people that watch you on TV, they start to look at you like you're really a part of their family, like you're their friends, like we really know you, right? And so, because it's called The Cosby Show and the dynamic is family, people get to thinking that Bill Cosby's really your dad. Like, see, these are really your parents. And you said something very interesting to me in an interview once where you talked about I think the interviewer asked you, was Bill Cosby your hero? And you were like, no, my parents were my heroes. Were your parents ever offended, or did they take issue with the fact that people really thought that Bill Cosby and Felicia Rashad
Right.
were raising you?
Not at all. No, not at all. Yeah,
Okay.
any kind of identity crisis had to deal with other people and not us, right? Like, in his, Mr. Cosby's son, that was my dude, right? Like we were close friends. So we go out and people be like, "Hey, you're Bill Cosby's son," and we would just laugh because like, no, actually, that's really Bill Cosby's son. So yeah, so that was never an issue for for any of us.
Were there times, because the show got so big and it became one of the most legendary television shows of all time, were there times where you were actually tired of being on the show,
No,
or tired of being in the Cosby bubble? You know what
right?
I
No,
mean?
because I was still doing theater, and the acting roles that I was choosing were roles that were different from Theo. So as an actor, I was able to go do work that wasn't necessarily paying a whole lot of money because I had this gig, that was paying me. So I had that. And I think by the time we got to our last season, season 8, I think that was the point where we were all ready to move on. But we all collectively were ready to move on. Keisha actually wanted to go to school, because she had spent her whole life with tutors, so she actually wanted to go off to school. Felicia, had Felia. She wanted to, just be a mom for a bit. So by season 8, we were all ready to move on. But it was a collective. We were ready to move on.
I don't know if you've seen it, but uh, the A Different World, that cast, like they had a whole reunion special that was, I believe, on Peacock, and recently they were on Red Table Talk. Do you think we will ever see the Cosby cast? I know it would be minus
Mm.
one, maybe. The Cosby cast reunite in a similar fashion to be celebrated, because everybody knows you guys have been through a
Yeah,
lot, with all the news and controversy and everything that went on with Bill Cosby. It has not really allowed you all to be
yeah.
celebrated. Is this something that you think will happen? Is it something that you would like to see
I don't know. And I think because if we were to do it, um, even if we were to do it minus one, there's still the elephant in the room. So it's either, you know, you can't talk about it, you can't not talk about it, right? So it kind of so to do a reunion like that and to celebrate that show without him would probably be strange. And because we all have our personal relationships with each other. um so it's not necessarily important for us. I guess for us, it's not necessarily important for the world to see our relationships with each other. We do it. We do have relations with each other. We're all mad cool. um we talk. um yeah, so I don't, and we've never talked about it. I don't know if anybody has a desire to do that. I look at all these other shows and all these reboots and go, man, we could have made a lot of money.
happen? Right? I'm
Man,
saying, I'm
I'm like,
saying, you know.
Fuller House, they're doing their thing. The Connors, man, we could be making a killing right now.
Well, I mean, I guess to that end, I mean, it's natural and it's human, but were you ever resentful because you have, one person who has impacted impacted you guys' lives in the way this show was seen? Like for me, I still watch the Cosby Show. It does not bother me to watch it. I don't think about anything else, but this was a good ass show. Like, and I'm entertained by it. But were you ever resentful? Because you just mentioned like nostalgia's big right now. There's a second window for a lot of things. And were you ever resentful toward Bill Cosby because it sort of changed some things about how people viewed the show and maybe impacted you guys financially? Was there ever any resentment?
No, um, and not resentment, not resentment, because it drove home. Uh, hmm, like, I get how this business works, for one, and there are so many. Just that whole situation is so, it's so layered, man. Um, and I'll never say anything. Um, whenever I talk about it, like, I don't, I can't defend him or his actions at all. Um, but I also can't throw him under the bus completely, because I have an understanding of all of the layers. Like, it's so complex, and there's so many shades of gray, um, that most people will never get. So I think, for me, yes, there is the piece of, um, financial hit that we all took, but also, it hasn't really affected my career, right? Like, again, to go back from the very beginning, we set up, me, my mother, my team, uh, we set up this life after the show, so my life would not be dependent upon that show, uh, or dependent upon Theo. So I mean, trust me, it truly sucked to watch the ship go down the way it went down. Um, but, like you, and like people, like, I understand, why some people can't watch the show, but like you, and like people who still watch the show, um, even myself, like, the show is the show. Like, this was such it's a timeless show. It's an iconic show, still an important show. The effect that it had on, um, Black people worldwide, uh, can never be taken away, right? So there's still so much to be proud of in terms of that legacy. But at the same time, I had moved on a long time ago. And I make the joke about,
Mm.
hey, we could be making a whole lot of money right now by doing a reboot. But but even if none of this went down, we probably still wouldn't have done a reboot, because, like what Mr. Cosby said, was, we said everything that we had to say. So I don't even know if that lane would really been a viable lane regardless.
As I watch the show now, I realize the brilliance of the show was that it managed to be a very relatable show to everybody, but it was a Black show. Like, nobody ever watched the Cosby Show and was like, "Oh, they're not Black." People used to talk that they don't relate shit and like, "Oh, these ain't how really Black people really are." But nobody Black ever watched that show and said like, "These people ain't Black." Like, they were like, "That's my cousin. Theo is my cousin." So straight up. So I think that's like the brilliant hidden layer of this show. Now, you mentioned a little bit ago about how you always were preparing for life after Cosby. The very first thing I want to talk to you about in terms of one of the ways you have pivoted in this business, if y'all didn't know, I think this is one of the most fun facts about Malcolm-Jamal Warner. He directed the Any Heartbreak video. And I swear to God, I want a complete oral history from you of how this happened. Bro, when I tell you I knew that whole routine, when I tell you top to bottom, great video on the scooters, I'm here
Yeah.
for it. I was like, that's one of my favorite videos from that era.
Word.
Tell
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
don't leave shit out. How did this go down?
So I had directed, um, this film short, and so when I first started doing my own little projects, I was doing like these film shorts set to music. Like, the first thing I did was this film short. It's funny because me and Questlove talked about this a couple weeks ago. I did this film short, uh, but it was too. You remember State of Shock? The song about Michael Jackson and Mick Jagger. So I did this little film short to that song, and I just had like a friend of mine's 8 millimeter camera, and I shot that. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna shoot. I'm gonna get a 16 millimeter camera and shoot this. And I used this song. There was an instrumental version of "If It Isn't Love" that Jimmy Jam and Cherry Lewis did, and it was like this, but it wasn't just the instrumental version of the song. It was like it was the same chord progression, but it had this jazzy, airy kind of feel to it. It's really dope.
Can I just stop you right there? Do you know so few people know about this song? I have it on my iPod. Like it's one of my favorite tracks because then that shit bangs. Like people don't know about the
Yeah,
instrumental version because
yeah,
you hear Ralph go the why
yeah,
and he just
yeah.
comes in like
Yes,
it's
yes,
dope as
yes,
fuck.
yes.
Yes, it's dope as fuck. If y'all don't know, like go to
Yeah, man.
Spotify. If it isn't love, get the instrumental. It's banging. Go
Yeah,
ahead. I just had
word,
to interrupt you. Like
word.
I'm in that hive. I'm
Right,
that deep in the hive.
yeah,
I knew about the instrumental.
yeah. I love that. So I shot this little short film to that, and somehow uh, Michael Bivins saw it, and we've always kind of known each other through in passing, mutual friends and whatnot. And I get this call out of the blue, and Mike is like, "Yo, we saw that video, and we want you to direct our next video." And I was like, "Cool." We're like, "Which song?" I was like, "Any Heartbreak." I was like, "Shit, yeah." And then they sent me the remix version. I was like, "Oh, this bangs right here." But they're like, "But we don't have a whole lot of money." So one of the things I'm really proud of that video is that was probably their least expensive video ever. But we only had $40,000 to do the video. So um so of course I was honored. Like I was like wow, they dug that enough to have me direct this video, and probably because it wasn't a $250,000 video, so everybody was like, okay, 40, he can do it. But it's all good. I'll make the most of it. So we were coming up with the concept, and scooters, and so we were like, where are we going to shoot it? Like we don't, look at our budget. And I think it might have been Bill. He was like, yo, we should shoot it at Eddie Murphy's house. I was like, all right, okay. So we all went to Eddie's office on the Paramount lot and just bum rushed his office. Was like, yo, we're doing this video, but we need to do it at your house, right? He was like, okay, cool, we can do that. We'll do this party at your house. So we shot that at Eddie's house. And the whole mopeds and everything, when they're coming down the drive, like that's Eddie's crib. Um, yeah, and I mean that's really the long and short of it. And it became like, it came out and it became like this cult, like one of the dopest videos.
So did you do it for the price of on the house
No,
for free? In other
no,
words,
right, right.
did you
No,
direct? Did you get paid anything for
yeah,
this?
I mean, I took a director's cut, but which was, I mean, it might have been. I honestly don't even remember, to be 100% honest. But it was. Trust me, it wasn't a lot at all.
Now that wasn't the only video you directed. You also directed Special Ed's video,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. Said no. This was my first one. Special Ed, I'm Magnificent was my second. I was on a roll for a minute. Those are the two biggest videos. The other videos, were newer artists, and they never really got a whole lot of traction. But yeah, and then I ended up doing another video for Special Ed. Um, yeah, but those are definitely like two of my favorite videos.
So, I mean, I think what people, a lot of people didn't realize or know that, directing aside, that you always had this love affair with music, and you had a love affair with poetry. So, when did you, or how were you, as you were having this acting career, how were you nurturing that part of it, the poetry part? I mean, I know how it kind of turned out, but early on, how were you able to really invest in that at the same time that you're also having this burgeoning acting career?
So here's the funny thing. So my dad went to Lincoln University, with Gil Scott-Heron and Brian Jackson, and uh, and he went to Lincoln because Langston went to Lincoln. And when I was like 6 or 7 years old, before ever even taking acting class, I made a declaration to my parents that I was either going to be a famous actor, a famous poet, or a famous basketball player. So the poetry was just always, I came out the womb listening to Gil. Um, one of my favorite books as a kid was this book, Poems on the Life and Death of Malcolm X, that I used to keep on my desk in school, and kids would make a joke like, "Oh, hey, somebody wrote a book about you," ha 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 ha, because they never heard of Malcolm X before, right? So the poetry has always been part of my life, the creative writing. My mother was always supportive of all of my creative writing. But it wasn't until about 90, it was like 93, I was in LA, and me and my me and my man went to this poetry spot called the Juke Joint, and people were doing poetry, and I was like, "Oh shit, this is it." And that night, Jada uh, was there. Jada Pinkett did a poem. Tashina Arnold did a poem, and all of these women who came on stage doing poetry were doing these male bashing poems. I was like, the fuck? So me and my man was like, yo, you know what? We're gonna write a piece. We're gonna come back next week. We're gonna give him something else. We're gonna give him the other side of this bullshit they talk about. So we both went back, and we wrote poems, and we came back the next week. He spit his, I spit mine, and my poem was really about you know the other side of how relationships go awry, and everybody in the audience responded. Like, of course, the guys were like, "Yeah, yeah," but even the women were like, "Yeah, he's right." So what occurred to me was like, okay, so this thing I just wrote um, was so relatable to everybody. So before, all of my writing, writing poetry, writing raps, like that was just kind of all for like me and and my friend, the rap were for me and my friends, but the poetry was really just for me. But to realize that there's actually a venue where you could actually, write poetry and then do it in front of people. And because of my stage, my theater background, I was like, oh, this is great. I have a captive audience, to share like my own writing. So uh, that was the thing that really kicked it off. I had this other avenue of expression, and it was something that was fun. But then a couple of years later, it became something that I needed. It was an outlet it was an outlet. It was an avenue of creative expression that I needed because it was where I couldn't express myself. There were things that I couldn't express as an actor or as a director, right? But as a poet, there was this outlet where I can write and share things that are on my chest, and clearly there's an audience for it. Clearly people can relate to what I'm writing. Clearly I'm good at it because I've been doing it all of my life, and then it just kind of became its own thing. And then I started playing bass. Like, I was doing poetry before the music, and when I started playing bass, I put a band together just so I can play bass. I wasn't doing poetry with the band at all, but I was still doing poetry at poetry houses. I was doing poetry with other bands. But then after a while, doing gigs were costing me money, because after you pay the band, pay videographer, have done print and advertising, I was coming out of pocket $200, $300 every gig. So I was like, well, if I have a CD to sell after the show, then I won't feel like I'm losing money. But I don't have any original songs, because we were doing Living Color, John Coltrane, right? So I was like, I don't have any original. Okay, well, if I do my own music and then do my poetry to my music, then I would have a CD to sell. So I won't feel like I'm losing money every time I do a show. So that's really how the music and poetry, intertwined. And then that's really when the whole poetry situation took off for me.
As you kind of mentioned before, that you've always kind of prided yourself on making sure that you took challenging, roles, and especially I'm sure as you transition out of the Cosby Show is even more important. You have a series, The Accused. What can you tell me about the role that you're playing on this show?
It's a courtroom anthology series. So every episode is its own standalone storyline, cast, the whole nine. Yeah, and every episode starts in the courtroom, and then there's a flashback to show how this person got to this courtroom. But it's a really strong episode. Um, it it took a lot out of me um, as a man, as a parent, because it's very emotional. Um, and it's also very very challenging because it has something to do um, with my daughter, on the show. So having a daughter and having to do this episode about say my daughter being compromised, if you will. Um, yeah, it was deep to have to do. Um, and it pulled some things out of me and made me have to go some places that I didn't necessarily in my body of work haven't necessarily have had to go.
So at this stage in your career, having accomplished so much on the acting side,
Yeah.
well, in both genres, actually acting and music, but I'll just keep it to the acting side. What is it that motivates you today?
A wife and a daughter.
You're like, these checks got to keep coming.
Baby need new shoes every few months. um, in all honesty, there's that. Um, it's like now I have, but before it's me, I'm, taking care of me. So, in between gigs, I could float and things are cool. But, there's another level of responsibility, um, having a wife and a daughter. So there's that. But there is a newfound freedom that I'm having with my craft, right? Like I've been doing this like 40 something years, but I'm in a place now where acting, and I guess I go through phases, but I'm in a place now where acting, the craft, excites me as much as it did when I was 9 years old doing theater. Because what happens is when your passion becomes a career, there are politics and everything else that comes with the territory of having a career that can sometimes get in the way of the joy of that passion. So it's also one of the reasons why I have the poetry and music, because especially as a musician, the the amount of work and focus and dedication and passion and commitment that it takes just to be an okay musician is something that I've used to reinvigorate my passion for the acting side of things. But now, coming off of 6 seasons of The Resident, having done The Accused, I'm in a place where I'm really excited about the work again.
Well, Malcolm, before I get you out of here, I'm going to play a game with you that I play with every guest who appears on Jemele Hill's
Ooh,
Unbothered. Very simple.
ooh.
The game is called This or That, and believe it or not, this
Okay.
is
I'm
where
gonna,
the
I'm gonna go
controversy
Frank
happens.
Underwood.
Always. Yes, I know that's quite the
Yeah,
tease. So let's
yeah,
start with this one.
yeah.
Hank Moody or Frank Underwood? I know Californication was your show, as is House of Cards.
Right.
Or Francis Underwood. Either way.
That's hard to well because I already won a Grammy.
um,
That's kind of
winning a
unfair.
Grammy or winning an Emmy. I know you've been nominated, but I don't think you've ever won. But which one is more
Oh,
meaningful
mm.
or would be more meaningful for you?
Winning an Emmy is um, definitely on my list and uh, definitely means
It
something
is.
different
Mm-hmm.
than a Grammy. Ooh, yeah, man. Oh, really? Really? Oh,
Mm, okay. Okay.
Whitey on the
Um,
Moon.
the revolution will not be televised or Whitey on the Moon. Gil
Yeah.
Scott Heron. Yeah. Yeah, really.
You made all of these hard. Yeah. Oh, you made all of these hard.
Mm. Okay. And finally,
Oh.
the Gordon Gartrell episode or when Theo got an
Okay, I'm gonna say
earring.
Gordon Gartrell. I'm gonna say yeah, yeah,
That one
yeah.
hurt.
Because the
Oh,
earring,
yeah, yeah, I
we
made
had
them
that one
hard.
scene, which is still cracks me up every time I see it in the bedroom. But the Gordon Gartrell, there were so many scenes that makes that win over.
Denise!
I think we rehearsed. So on that show, by the time we were like pretty much rehearsing like
That's true.
2 days.
See,
Um,
when I watch the
so it's
Theo
just
got a
somewhere in
hearing
that
one,
two
I
days,
am
it just
amazed at the
just where
synchronicity
we
of your
did it, we just
movements
kind
with Bill
of we
Cosby.
kind of felt
Like,
it.
did
Like
that take
we
multiple
always had
takes? Did that take a lot to figure that
um,
out?
a really cool uh, synchronicity in our relationship and our on camera dynamic. And I think that's a perfect example of of that synchronicity that we had. I know, I know. It look, it's in the chamber, and I hope I never have to use it.
Hey, have you ever used on your, or I
Yeah,
guess you probably,
man,
she's too
yeah,
young now,
yeah,
but
truly.
I
You know,
guess you
but
got it in your
what's funny
wheelhouse to
is,
tell her, I
so
brought you
she'll
in this
watch
world,
the
I'll take
show,
you
right?
out.
I'll watch it with her, and one, it's so surreal to watch it
Don't show
with
her that
her.
episode.
And she knows it's me. She's like, "Hey, that's Papa," but she
Yeah.
wants to fast forward to Rudy and Olivia
Let's
scenes.
hope that's the big joker that
And in
never gets
fact, she
pulled.
used to call the show
Definitely.
Rudy's Family. Yeah. It's funny. So here's also something that's so surreal. Keisha from day one has always been, my homie. And she's still my
Of course.
homie. And we hang out, and her daughter is a couple of months older than my daughter, and they absolutely love each
Oh, that
other.
must make Keisha Napoleon very happy.
So yeah, so me and Keisha just look at each like we look at our daughters, we look at each other like this is nuts right here. And they've got that kind of relationship. It's like, you know what? They're gonna be friends for life. When we're gone, they're still gonna be friends. Like it's that kind of bond that they have. So it's pretty cool.